Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for staying late here or before lunch for our session here. My name is Casey Watson. I'm with Sherpa Technology Group based up in Redwood City, California. And I'd like to welcome you to this session, which we hope will be very, very informative on how to take an enterprise video initiative from conceptualization or idea on through to execution. And we've got a special guest here, a good friend of mine, Alan Hanslick from Western Asset, who is going to help guide us through several of the key steps. And you know, there's not going to be all of the steps, and everyone in the room and watching has differing levels of experience with rolling out video initiatives. But I think this will be very, very valuable for those of us who are looking to do it in a very efficient manner. So I think just to get started, the whole idea and the thesis for this conference thus far, and why we're all here, is that video is actually moving from a kind of an experiment inside the enterprise to a requirement for business. I think we're seeing that in many different ways, many use cases coming down the pike. The thing is that we also need to look at video as being exceptionally complex, and I think we're going to hear a lot about that from Alan as we get started here. But you do have both complexities, both from the technology side of it, as well as the business process side of rolling out these video initiatives. So, for instance, on the technical side of the ledger, you've got implementation or integration with existing technology platforms that may already exist, delivery both inside and outside of the organization, so outside the walls of the organization, and how to accomplish that. Security and, of course, storage is always of a big concern. Equally important when companies are going down this path, and we'll hear more from Alan about this, is looking out for things such as governance and compliance or legal type of issues for video. And so we'll get into that in a lot more detail. So the big question and the thesis for this conversation that we're going to be having with Alan is, so what happens when you get the call at 3 a.m., the red phone rings from the executive team, and video is now a mandate? You are IT. How should you start this process? How should you engage your people both inside the organization and outside to be most efficient and effective as you possibly can? So, with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Alan, and he's going to get into his steps. We've broken this down into 5 simple steps. Of course, we want this to be interactive, so if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to ping us with those. And then, Alan, maybe if you want to just say a few words about yourself and your company, and we can dive right in.
Great, thanks, Casey. And for those of you that may be from IT, no one should be surprised if the phone rings at 3 a.m. and what to do, even though, so I'll have an IT spin on most of the things I talk about. As part of our organization, as we've adopted video as well. So, as Casey mentioned, I work for Western Asset Management. Just to give you a little profile, hopefully that does relate to video as well. We're one of the probably top 5 or top 6 world bond investment firms. We're global, so we have 6 offices that stretch across. We have wide area networks and such, and offices in different regions and locations and languages. That we provide websites and streaming for across that framework. So I run IT operations for Western Asset, have for 15 years, and it's fun from my perspective. I'd say in some cases, video is a lot more challenging than IT across the board to do that. So we've slowly adopted all the responsibility for AV and mobile devices, and we have 30 video conference systems in play. So now it's grown much more to the videoscape, from social media to certainly creating our own content and distributing video in and out of the organization, and everything that goes along with that. So that's framework anyway that where we started. So I'm going to try to talk a little faster because we only have 30 minutes. So the getting started steps. Again, from an IT perspective, I believe we found videos even harder than defining the correct requirements that even IT requirements are from a business perspective. Right? It's sort of a new world for most people, even though they see on the flip side of what the consumers are doing with video. So internally, definitely your level of understanding of video becomes really important, right? As you talk to your business partners and try to explain what can or cannot be done from a video perspective. If you don't know that technology, just like IT, it's really hard to have those conversations. And most of the time, right, they'll be talking about iPads and YouTube and social media, and why can't we just create content and push content around the organization, right? So your knowledge level is pretty important internally, and obviously you can go externally to achieve that as well, and understanding, what those requirements are from a business perspective. We've certainly found internally and showing them is, in a lot of cases, a lot easier than talking about it. Again, as they say, well, I just want to use my iPad in this way, right, and join a video conference, or I want to be able to watch videos that you're producing internally, but the iPad's connecting externally to a wireless access point, or you may have wireless access that you're allowing the SSL back in. So you start to have those conversations. It's really hard not to talk technically, which is very difficult for business people to understand. So having some ability to show them examples of why the enterprise video creation, production, distribution, and availability is a lot different than what they're seeing in the consumer. The consumer side is pretty important. So first steps, things I did. I think I'd encourage everyone to start building, internally versus IT from a video perspective. As far as cost, there's a lot of solutions out there. Almost too many to figure out. But it's pretty easy to get started and start to build some basic solutions, and that really helps from again the learning of the internal knowledge base. So you could, conferences like this, to a lot of magazines, you can get inundated and read a lot of information about video, but until you really set up your first encoder, until you really start doing flash streaming, or have a small studio and create content and find out that, there's a wrapper, that Canon uses versus Panasonic cameras, and how do you ingest that into Final Cut? All those things are pretty tough until you start to get your hands around it. So I'd encourage everyone as part of that knowledge base, and also in the effort to start to narrow those technologies and try to figure out what technologies in the scape that you would want to consider, that you would want to use. So it really helps to start to provide basic solutions to the business, and really just as the first steps, you want to go out and start to build stuff, and hopefully they will come.
Okay. Any questions thus far on kind of the getting started phase before we move into step number 2, which is near and dear to my heart? It's setting the table, and by setting the table, Alan's going to talk about bringing all of the various folks from around the organization to the table to have those initial assessment type conversations. What we see many times is organizations, the order goes to IT to start to roll video out, and IT will then roll up their sleeves and start to do video without actually bringing the business units and the various stakeholders to the table first. And so one thing that Alan and team over at Western have done, which is, I think, is very, very good step, is they brought all those folks to the table, fleshed out all the various use cases, all the needs, and then began to go for design and a game plan after that. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. From the business and IT, as you mentioned, certainly key, important. The Western philosophy, which has been good, and our IT function, again, as it relates to that, happens to be owned by the COO of the firm. We report directly into him. So he's had a long philosophy, even from an IT perspective, that we have some breadth of what the business functions really are and how they operate. If you don't know what the business is doing to some level, and that depth can obviously can vary across your staff, but it really helps to understand what the business functions are and how they operate. If not, it's very easy to sit in front of a business user and have them tell you, I want this, in video, and not really understand what they really mean, or what that's going to mean from a deliverable, from an IT perspective, and how you have to build that. So that's been key, and so we have people on our staff that hopefully have enough of that understanding. Then clearly, what are the drivers and owners? And sometimes the owners may not be exactly the drivers of, so what are they looking for from video? What are they looking to do? You can easily get into 20 questions with the business users as you talk to them and saying, well, we want to just take an iPad and want to be able to access all the internal content in the firm. Right? It's a very simple sentence. In our case, well, you have an iPad that is, do you want to do that when the iPad's internal in the office? Where they don't have connectivity because we don't have wireless, well, I can build that. Or do you want it external to the office? As soon as now they're external, do we have content sitting outside? No, it's inside. So now they want to access internal content externally. So it's SSL, VPN. It happens to be on SharePoint. So now, we're fighting between media platforms of SharePoint and other places where media lives internally in the firm. So even that one simple requirement, and we've had these conversations, could go on for months to try to define how important that is, how much that's going to cost, and how do you solve that solution. And if you build that solution, you probably built 50% of other infrastructure components that may provide encoding and streaming and and some security aspects and multicast support and network requirements that you may need. So that's that. And the other players, as Casey mentioned as well. So a lot of cases you can find, they say, well, here's the driver, here's the business requirement, and we're funding it, here's the money, and they may forget the compliance and legal aspect, right? In a lot of cases, on video conference, we went through and streamed video conference and recorded them, and kept them for a long time. And then legal and compliance found out after the fact and said, well, that may not be a good case for us from a financial perspective, so we want to probably have a termination of videos. So before you can start to produce content, you definitely want to, you want to find out before you produce it and find out that you have to pull videos offline or you haven't been in compliance and stuff. So clearly getting those players as part of the table is pretty key. And as well as your own management. In a lot of cases, I find video a lot like IT, where you work with the business and define requirements, and there may or may not be a formal process behind the scenes for your own budget and your own management understanding where you're going and why you're developing stuff. So all that is really key to hopefully getting to the point that you want to gather the requirements, right? We have found, with video, and people are used to it, between I want to bring my iPhone in, I want to use my iPad, I want to watch social media sites, right? All those other flavors of things that everyone's been talking about at the conference. It's definitely very dynamic. So we've sort of let it flow in, try to be very flexible. I find that you can probably build multiple solutions in parallel, solving a bunch of different things, and they will start to overlap, and you start to realize, in the best worst case of the world, you may have multiple encoders. You may have encoders on the outside versus encoders on the inside. You may have different file formats and obviously distribution. Things we're all talking. Everyone's talked about at a bunch of different levels. So on the outset, again, setting the table and getting started, I found that worked very well. And then eventually, as you start to build that knowledge, the business starts to understand and see solutions being developed. We work to be more formal on project plans and the deliverables that you want to provide, and the priorities and costs are more the formality of managing the project in the end.
Okay, question over.
My question is there at any point is what you're doing client-driven? So the investors say, well, we want to watch a webcast of this, or
right.
This is coming from internally saying, the CTO wants to do this, but the investors or clients want it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. In our case is probably from every point. The business people want to do video conferences and want to record it and want them streamed at their desktops at the same time. The client service group itself wants to do marketing functions. They want to be able to utilize more devices inside of the network, and also our clients want to be able to get access to media as well as PDFs or videos, and we do host also webcasts and our own webinars out to our clients. So that's another spin of in that case we happen to be using Intercall, which we're generally unhappy with from an IT perspective because we like to tend to own technology and control it. And so when things go wrong, the business would love to come back and ask you why it's gone wrong. But so that's the whole conversation of internal outsource from that perspective. So yeah, so we have the client aspect is, so we have drivers probably coming from every direction, from the business side, the client side, and the AV, the mixed media, the webcasting, the pure video streaming internally, externally, the use of BYOD, all that starts to turn into this enterprise solution, right? That we all want to get to. So this is part of that framework, and certainly sharing my experiences of our path of how we got there.
A quick question too there. How then do you prioritize when all these different groups are coming to you, different needs, requirements? How does one kind of sift through all that and prioritize?
We did at first. For people who are technologists, they love technology, and most of the group I've built as well. I found video even more exciting, so it's tempting to want to try to not prioritize, because it is somewhat exciting and pretty fun endeavor, even though you have to figure out where resources are going to come from. The serious answer is, again, working with your business partners. And it's good to have regular meetings, which we've established with them, to continually reiterate, and you'll find their priorities will change from month to month of what's really important. When they say, oh my gosh, I just need my iPad to work on the network, or I really need this client to have access to all this data, right? Or I really need to record video conferences going on between 5 offices. All those requirements you find as you hopefully come back and reiterate to them and talk a little bit more detail about what it's going to take, and maybe there's some approximate budget, and the infrastructure that's needed for that, you'll find in in some cases very quickly, you know, oh really, that's $100,000 to really do that, and why? Well, this is going to take me 6 months to do that, and so then they start to reshift, and so that ongoing dialogue is pretty important to hopefully get to the truth of what's most important for them, what you should focus on.
And phases too, probably, I'm sure you
Yeah.
look at as well. So, okay, terrific. So in looking at the next step, you know, Alan basically defined it as picking your team, and I think that this is extremely important stage. He's going to talk about the internal folks that are on the team as well as external folks in certain cases. And why don't you go ahead and talk about picking the team?
Absolutely. Yeah, and as I started, I mean, the reiteration that again, I run operations, so I have 7 managers and 50 people underneath me that really run every technology aspect for the firm. So in some ways, video is very, very important. In other ways, you know, it's a far subset of my job of what's really important. You know, what we need to do to accomplish video, but it's, you know, and I think a lot of organizations, IT takes the responsibility. So I personally had the opportunity, you know, to learn a lot about the video aspect, you know, how video works. From production, we have our own production studio, so in some ways we're doing formal video production for VOD for the firm, which will be going broadcast. In other ways, right, we're solving client needs for streaming media internally, streaming media externally, right, doing content management, figuring out what that really means from that perspective. So I can't stress enough the understanding of you know, video itself to figure out what to do. So I took my IT team and people who were interested, made sense. I built a cross-functional team from help desk and support who are pretty much the facing front for the business users. You know, a network person clearly for all the network implications internally. And people who, you know, a few other folks are doing the AV, the infrastructure, the core telecommunication, and put them together in a functional team led by me to really help, you know, you need to spend consistent time, and again, we probably do it more formally than we even allow the business to interact with us to some level, to make sure we understand what the infrastructure is and have the debates that you guys all have, and you have the conferences of, you know, why are we using Cisco for video conference, and why are we streaming via a video conference solution, and why are we streaming via Flash, and why do we want to support WMV and the network, and how are we going to push content externally with, you know, security firewalls, and, you know, all this. So we meet weekly to hash through all the infrastructure and the technical aspect of what the things are going on, so I can have a firm understanding from an infrastructure and the cost and implementation when I go back to the business of why things, you know, in the enterprise are not as they seem in the consumer world, and why they can simply do video in the way it is. So that's pretty important. Again, and assigning those real tasks and projects, just like I would from an IT perspective, you know, are important because we give people responsibility to go figure out QoS and the network that relates to video and split streaming, you know, via our Riverbed appliances. So, you know, it's no different than we have to learn new versions of Exchange and IT technologies, where my team now has responsibility to learn about video internally. And obviously there is the leverage externally as well. So there's a lot of great partners out there and consultant agencies. You know, and some of them are very agnostic to, and they're not selling products and they don't care what product you use, which I find them the most valuable because you can get stuck down a path, obviously based on an encoder and a streaming and a format in a lot of different ways depending on what you're trying to do in the organization. So you certainly should look to leverage them as well. I mean, overall, I mean, I find the video more than anything is definitely this progression, right? It's really this evolution. You can't sort of, you know, ignore it, do a little bit, and, you know, throw up a Wi-Fi for an iPad, you know, then suddenly you want to start streaming internally content, externally organization. If you haven't really done much in between that, it's a consistent process. You have to spend time on it. As we know, the video world, you know, which is being driven from the consumers, the BYOD, you know, from the YouTube side of the world, and certainly the technology is being driven a lot from the broadcast side of the world, from the Netflixes and the Rokus. That industry, you know, if you don't go to NAB, it's always another good conference. They talk a lot about video there, so there's a lot of big drivers behind the scenes that are creating that technology. So it's changing fast. You know, every day, every week, there's new things in videos to figure out and learn, and in 6 months, you could be behind the curve in what you're offering to the organization. And as I mentioned, the choices along the way of those products and the vendors, who you choose for partners, is pretty key in building certainly the core infrastructure. You know, if you don't have that, then obviously it becomes more problematic and more costly to deliver solutions across the board.
Okay, so great segue over to pitfalls, and I think this is the lessons learned is absolutely critical for all of us in the room. I know you guys have had your fair share of hurdles to jump over along the way, as is everyone, but I think identifying them and helping others with those could be very valuable.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you were going to say pitfall. We haven't had any of those. I mean, again, in the beginning, I mean, as we all know, video is very, very complex. Analysis paralysis is really easy to get into, and not wanting to build anything. You know, making the first decision for your encoder, if it's hardware, if it's software. You know, what kind of cameras you're going to buy, what kind of what medium formats are you going to support. You know, how many different things are you going to compress. So it's pretty easy to get caught up on. I'm afraid to spend that first $30,000 and what that technology is, because now you feel like, you know, obviously you need to make it work, and that is going to limit and control the decisions that you're making down the road. So making solutions work. I mean, we're IT people. I think we're pretty smart. I mean, but you know, go get the Digital Rapid, Stream Z, hardware encoder. You know, some of the vendors for the video stuff, you read the full manuals. I mean, they don't explain why to use the product. They may say how to just push buttons, but if you don't know what a DRC codec is, or you don't know what MPEG-2 is versus an MPEG-4, or why you're using H.264, you know, over an Apple codec, I mean, they're not going to help you use that product and how you set up that entire box. And you know, and you can get help to do all that stuff, but obviously it's, you know, there'll always be that trade-off of cost of what you want to own and do internally, and what you want to send outside, or you know, where you want to spend money from that perspective. So we found in some cases, I mean, some solutions aren't designed as well, and they are more complex. It is harder to make them work. So that can be a pretty good pitfall when you've made promises and you're trying to build things that you're trying to deliver. Building the enterprise day one, again, the complexity of this world. You know, Casey and I just sat on the last conference, which was very good as well. I mean, everyone, you know, it's hard to just, you know, separate video conference and video and streaming internally, and live versus VOD, and the different formats that you have to support, and hitting all the mobile devices. I mean, you can spend hours and hours on every one of those topics. So day one, I mean, you're really looking to build individual solutions, sometimes in parallel across the board, and hopefully with some insight of, you know, how they can turn into enterprise, and the products and the formats and the things you've decided from an infrastructure point of view that you want to support, and you know that you have a good reason why you want to have WMV versus Silverlight, or you want to absolutely only do H.264, all those types of decisions in the organization. And as well, I mean, a lot of these products can be very manual. You can spend a lot of time in your staff every time you need to do a web conference, that, you know, there's a lot of babysitting. You're worried if it's going to work, right, and things stop working. So you know, as you build through this this progression, you know, that could be definitely a big resource drain, as well as the infrastructure piece as well. So if you're lacking some of these infrastructure components, I mean, you wonder why it works one day and it doesn't work the next day, and why the live streaming isn't keeping up, right? Why your VOD videos quality levels are changing because you know, you don't have the profile set up right, and people didn't save, you know, the profiles in the encoders and things like that. So that reliability relates to that. And all those pitfalls, as you know, are pretty much all video related. On the business side, you know, they love to ask and not necessarily have funding. So again, that relationship of understanding what they're doing and knowing they're actually going to know they have to pay you money to do that, and they have to carry a budget. You know, our intent from a video perspective to want to necessarily, you know, promise solutions, because again, it can be pretty, you know, demeaning to some extent when they're always telling you that it's so easy and everyone can do it in the consumer world. Why can't you do it in the enterprise world? So, but you still have to watch that you don't promise them too much across the board, and be honest and realistic with them. And building the wrong solutions, either from the wrong set of requirements, or again, if you don't have that knowledge base and you get stolen on a product and you bring it in and you build it and it doesn't really produce what you need to do, it doesn't do the live piece, or you can't get the VOD the way you want out of it, it's easy to do that to some extent as well. So.
Excellent. I know we've got to motor on here, but final step obviously is execution. Pretty obvious, but Alan's going to hit you with a few points on executing.
Right. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I mean, my philosophy's been, you know, build it and they will come. I mean, to some extent, it's easy to talk a lot about video for months and months and months with the business. So, you know, I tried to figure out what the first thing was and what was most important in the business, and just set out to build it. And, you know, and at least you can provide it to them. You can show that to them. Breaking down in phases, right, in small segments of things that you can digest. Again, you know, my group for, you know, a year plus now, you know, still having the same conversation of how to build the VC solution versus the video internal solution versus the video external, and why live is going to be different than VOD, and is that using the same technologies? So breaking down as in small segments is manageable is definitely seemingly as helpful. Clearly, that constant communication with the business, you know, be able to talk to them in non-technical terms, I mean, I thought IT was complicated in talking about those concepts of the business. I think we lose it even faster. From a video perspective, it's just a very quickly complex subject of what you have to explain to them. So at some level, in implementing it, you need to be able to convey to them in terms they can understand if you're going to meet their requirements. Selecting areas, along with the priorities. Some video areas are easier. Some of those solutions on the onset to say, I just want to be able to do an internal webcast versus an external webcast, or I just need to stream video externally and not internally. So some of those solutions are far easier than other ones to tackle. So you can make decisions on what those are and set yourself up for a much longer time frame for ones that are much more complex. And again, leveraging the partners. So implementation, reach out and find people that you trust in the video industry. There's people for seemingly small dollar amounts, in my view of $15,000 to $25,000 or $30,000 of an engagement that they can help you, do design work and help you implement a given solution across the board. So I would encourage you to do that. And I would call that sort of the starting point of phase one. When you really get to a level of maturity, and until you get there, you really can't look to put it all together end to end. What's the real enterprise solution, right? How are you going to deal with a lot of external issues of security from a compliance legal perspective, from a network perspective, having the right solutions for that, how that's going to work. CMS, content management, another big area. If you walk around this show and hopefully other shows as well, you can see is a mixed bag of what products are out there. Once you start to develop a lot of content, it becomes again a huge resource effort if you don't have a system that's going to manage all that and deal with that, as well as CDNs and going to all the devices. Again, it's all the same subject of multiple devices and how you're going to stream and manage video all together. So that's really that. For an organization, hopefully it's gotten some maturity to figure out how you're really going to develop that enterprise solution.
Yeah, my question was regarding compliance, which is sometimes technology gets so far ahead of what you can even imagine you'd be doing. So you're already doing something and then compliance comes in. So how do you manage that? Do you say, go to compliance first, say we're thinking about they want to do this, can we do it, should we do it, or are you already doing it, and I'm going to give that example, and then they come back and say, oh no, you can't do that, you have to. Right. How do you navigate that?
How do you navigate it? I think that's just pure communication types of stuff, and having meetings and making sure you have a relationship to do that, but everything you said is accurate. In a lot of cases, I feel there are compliance issues now that are in policies that are defined. They may be in the form of PDFs, they may be in the form of hard copy even, or what we're allowed to put to the public, what we're allowed to put to our clients, disclaimers that go along with it. So some of those, in my view, is the media is just changing. So now it's in a video, they're stating the same types of things that we would put in a white paper and or in a live meeting with their clients. So they have some of those policies that you can apply to the media content and delivering video. In other cases, if it's not, then yeah, you just need to have those conversations with them and get their guidance on saying, look, we're the facilitators. The business is asking for this. We're going to develop this technology. You guys need to be in this loop. And it's kind of crazy that IT and video people have to make sure that loop is bridged. But you need to tell us what the restrictions are and what needs to be done. And it may be then reviewing the video when we do broadcast. We do video productions for VOD even, and we have client service and the trading desk people doing recordings for the marketing in front of the public. We have compliance people there in the conversation. They push the button, oops, sorry, don't say promise, don't say the rate was this percentage, don't say whatever that. So so it's figuring out whatever that best facilitation. That's far, far easier than doing it, sending the video and saying, oh, we don't like 10 things you've done, because there's that complexity of going back and wasting time and re-editing stuff and getting them back in the studio to shoot it. So whatever that takes, you're right, you need to work through that process. Yeah.
Can you talk in terms of a migration path or a growth path? When I first started video, my son went out and bought me, persuaded me to buy thousands of dollars worth of equipment I couldn't run, couldn't execute, $10,000 Macintosh with the software I couldn't begin to learn, and take everything anybody ever wanted. Can you talk to them?
Sure. I know we're running out of time. Depending on the projects, Yeah, it's sort of one of the business requirements, what they're kind of asking for you, and hopefully you get, you're going to get some sense of, that is the right solution, and you have the approval to sort of go develop it, and then it's that internal knowledge base of what you think is appropriate. So yeah, we started off with very cheap cameras, and moved them up a little bit. We started shooting videos without a studio on location in the office, and then rallied to get a studio. We bought, we used a cheap software encoder to start off with, and then once we understood that, then we went out and sort of invested in the hardware-based encoder. So yeah, it's a bit of trial and error. I mean, if you came to my studio, you'd probably find a bunch of devices that we bought that we never used, and it quite work right there. But hopefully they were for the lesser dollar amounts versus the big items that you really make an investment in that So it's sort of that good judgment, along with the knowledge base to understanding what you're using. You're right. It's easy to do it. We've done it.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody.
Yep, thanks.